Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of WCW Starrcade 1995. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is Jushin Thunder Liger versus Chris Benoit. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth match between Liger and Benoit, with Liger hitting a senton off the apron on Benoit to the outside. Liger then hits a head scissors on Benoit. Liger then was keeping the pace of the match. Liger then hits a powerbomb on Benoit in the middle of the ring. Liger then hits a brainbuster on Benoit as well for a near fall. Benoit then hits multiple German suplexes on Jushin Thunder Liger in the middle of the ring. Kevin Sullivan makes his way down to the ring. Benoit then hits his signature diving headbutt off the top rope on Liger. Sullivan then causes a distraction with the referee, which allows Liger to hit a roll-up on Benoit, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Jushin Thunder Liger. Hats off to Jushin Thunder Liger for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Koji Kanemoto versus Alex Wright. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Kanemoto and Alex Wright, with Kanemoto keeping the pace of the match. Wright then hits a head scissors on Kanemoto. Kanemoto then hits a chop on Alex Wright. Kanemoto then lands a kick on Alex Wright. Kanemoto then hits a moonsault off the top rope on Alex Wright as well. Kanemoto then hits a whisper in the wind on Wright for a near fall, but Kanemoto ultimately hits a roll-up on Alex Wright, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Koji Kanemoto. Hats off to Koji Kanemoto for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Lex Luger versus Masahiro Chono. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Luger and Chono. Lex then hits a press slam on Chono. Chono then applies an STF on Luger, but Luger breaks the hold. Luger then ultimately applies his signature torture rack on Masahiro Chono. And your winner of the match by submission is Lex Luger. Hats off to Lex Luger for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Johnny B. Bad versus Masa Saito. I thought this was a good matchup as well. Back and forth matchup between Johnny B. Bad and Saito, with Johnny and Saito both exchanging in the middle of the ring. Saito was keeping the pace of the match. Sonny Ono then attacks Johnny B. Bad with the referee being distracted. Johnny B. Bad then hits a sunset flip into a roll-up on Saito for a near fall, but Saito ultimately throws Johnny B. Bad over the top rope. Referee ends up seeing this, and your winner of the match by disqualification is Johnny B. Bad. Hats off to Johnny B. Bad for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Eddie Guerrero versus Shinjiro Otani. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Guerrero and Otani, with Guerrero hitting an enziguri on Otani. Guerrero then hits head scissors. Guerrero then hits a slingshot senton on Otani as well. Guerrero was keeping the pace of the match, with Guerrero hitting a powerbomb into a roll-up on Otani for a near fall. Otani then gets up, hits a springboard dropkick on Guerrero that looked absolutely brutal. Otani then hits a German suplex on Guerrero for a near fall. Guerrero then hits a Hurricanrana for a near fall on Otani. Otani then applies an ankle lock on Guerrero, but Guerrero breaks the hold. And Otani ultimately hits a roll-up on Eddie Guerrero, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Shinjiro Otani. Hats off to Shinjiro Otani for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Tenzan versus Randy Savage. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Tenzan and Savage, with Tenzan keeping the pace of the match. But Randy Savage ultimately hits his signature elbow drop off the top rope, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Macho Man Randy Savage. Hats off to the Macho Man Randy Savage for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Kensuke Sasaki versus Sting. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Sasaki and Sting, with Sting keeping the pace of the match. Sting then hits a Stinger Splash on Sasaki in the corner. Sasaki then hits a Power Slam on Sting in the middle of the ring. Sasaki then applies a Scorpion Deathlock on Sting, but Sting quickly breaks the hold. And then Sting applies a Scorpion Deathlock of his own on Sasaki. And your winner of the match is Sting. Hats off to Sting for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a triangle match where the winner will get a title shot later on that night against Macho Man Randy Savage in the main event. It is Ric Flair versus Sting versus Lex Luger. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Flair, Sting, and Luger, with Sting hitting a press slam on Flair. Flair then lands chops on Sting. Flair then hits a knee drop on Sting as well. Lex then gets tagged in. Lex hits a press slam on Flair. Flair then lands chops on Lex. Flair then applies a figure four leg lock on Lex Luger, but Luger breaks the hold. Sting and Luger were fighting on the outside, and your winner of the match due to count out is Ric Flair. Ric Flair will go on later that night in the main event to challenge Macho Man Randy Savage for the World Heavyweight Championship. So hats off to Flair for getting the win in that match. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of WCW Starrcade 1995. It is Ric Flair versus Macho Man Randy Savage for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. The match itself, it was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Flair and Savage. Flair lands multiple chops on Randy. Randy then unloads strikes on Flair. Paul Orndorff makes his way down to the ring in a neck brace from the attack that he received from Brian Pillman and Arn Anderson. Flair then was keeping the pace of the match. Randy then hits Flair with Jimmy Hart's megaphone. Randy then hits an elbow drop on Flair. Four horsemen make their way down to the ring. Arn then attacks Randy Savage. Referee is distracted. Flair then goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time new WCW World Heavyweight Champion, is the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. A couple of things I'm going to say about Starrcade 1995, man. Number one, this was a solid event for a Starrcade, in my honest opinion. Starrcade 1995 was awesome. Couple matches on here, honestly. There's not a match on this card that I really was disappointed with. Now, could the card have been a lot better? Sure. But all in all, this card was really stacked, man, in my honest opinion, from top to bottom. The opening matchup, Jushin Thunder Liger versus Chris Benoit. Solid match, man, really. Liger, absolute legend. And I mentioned this last week about Benoit. You know, obviously everybody knows about, you know, what happened to Chris Benoit and his situation and what happened, and it was awful. Just horrendous what happened with Benoit and his family, man, is absolutely insane. But as far as in-ring ability, in-ring talent, athleticism, Benoit had all that. Nobody could take away the in-ring ability that Chris Benoit had. He always gave 110% inside that square circle every single time he stepped in that ring. And it just made this match even perfect, man. Liger is an absolute legend over in Japan. Multi-time New Japan champion, especially the New Japan light heavyweight champion. Just an absolute legend, man. And to have this as an opening match for Starrcade is absolutely awesome. Kanemoto and Alex Wright, it was a solid match. I mean, it was kind of a slow start, but, you know, unfortunately, Alex Wright didn't get to pick up the win, and Kanemoto ended up hitting a roll-up on Alex Wright, pinning him for the 3. Lex Luger versus Masahiro Chono. This was a great match, man. I mean, Lex Luger, and I stated this in the past as well, in the early to mid, I would say the mid to late 80s, Lex Luger was the man for NWA, WCW. I mean, he was literally the total package for Jim Crockett Promotions back in the day. 100%. Masahiro Chono, man, the guy is an absolute legend. Absolute legend. And the thing of it is that, you know, WCW was working with New Japan Pro Wrestling in the early days of WCW. Heavily, in my honest opinion. Masahiro Chono was WCW's international heavyweight champion for quite a while, and I brought this up in a couple episodes from, I think it was 1994, that, you know, WCW was in like a transition phase, man, because they had the WCW World Championship belt, which at the time I believe was really held by Vader. And then you had guys like Rick Rude and Masahiro Chono wearing the all-gold WCW International Heavyweight Championship belt as well, and it was also being defended on WCW television as well as, you know, as well as in New Japan. You know, you had Chono go up against Great Muta for the belt, Rick Rude beating Chono, so on and so forth. So it was definitely a weird transition phase, but I think Chono is an absolute legend. He was also a member of the NWO. A lot of people don't realize that. Had a fantastic career, man. Chono was an absolute legend in professional wrestling. And it was a good match between him and Lex Luger. Johnny B. Bad versus Masa Saito. Johnny B. Bad, and I stated this in the past, man, you know, when Johnny B. Bad made his WCW debut, they were really pushing Johnny B. Bad. You know, he was television champion, had a lot of good matches, especially with Diamond Dallas Page. And this was a great match, man. Masa Saito, an absolute legend as well. Wrestled all over the world. I remember, you know, he would, you know, be tag team partners with Ken Patera back in the day. Absolute legend is Masa Saito, man. And unfortunately, Saito didn't get the, you know, the win in this match, and Johnny B. Bad ended up getting the win by disqualification. Eddie Guerrero versus Shinjiro Otani. This was probably the match of the night for me, in my honest opinion, just because I'm a huge Eddie Guerrero fan. And I believe this was Eddie Guerrero's first WCW pay-per-view debut match at Starrcade 1995. So that in itself is awesome. Eddie Guerrero, man, that guy's an absolute legend as well. I mean, his moves are still being, you know, implemented today. You know, Rey Mysterio is still paying homage to Eddie Guerrero. There's guys in AEW that are still paying respects to Eddie Guerrero, like guys like Penta and Rey Fenix. You know, so Eddie Guerrero, man, that guy, an absolute legend in professional wrestling. And honestly, Otani was no, you know, walk in the park for Guerrero either. I mean, Otani ended up getting the win in this matchup, but the moveset that Eddie Guerrero brought to the table was absolutely incredible. There's not a one person on this planet that can have a match with Eddie Guerrero that's going to be disappointing. You know, even in his WWE days, WCW days, I mean, the match that he had with Rey Mysterio, I believe it was Halloween Havoc 96 or 97. It was match of the year. It was a great match. It was, you know, hair or title versus mask or something like that, or hair versus mask. And it was match of the year, I believe, in 96 or 97. And those guys brought it, man. Really. And the cruiserweight division for WCW, and I stated this in my last video, severely, severely underrated, man. The amount of cruiserweights they had on that roster for WCW could have main evented any pay-per-view for WCW back then. 100%. Absolutely. Tenzan versus Randy Savage, solid match. Randy ended up picking up the victory with an elbow drop. Kensuke Sasaki versus Sting, a solid match. I believe at the time Sasaki was actually, at that time, the WCW United States Heavyweight Champion. So, again, Sasaki, absolute legend. Then we get Flair versus Savage in the main event. Two good rivals, honestly, Flair and Savage. I wouldn't say as big as Flair and Hogan or Hogan versus Savage, but it was a good rivalry between Flair and Savage. But unfortunately, you know, Flair got a little help from the Four Horsemen with the attack by Arn Anderson that allowed Ric Flair to get the victory over Randy Savage, and at that time become the new WCW World Heavyweight Champion. So a couple things I'm going to say real quick, too, before I get out of here, man. Number one, these WCW events are absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome, man. And if I had to give WCW Starrcade 1995 a solid rating from a 1 out of 10, I'm going to have to give it a 6.5 at best. Like I said, man, I'm not going to sit here and say that this was the best Starrcade I've ever seen. No way. And I don't think there's any event out there that's going to get a solid 10, to be honest with you. But Starrcade 1995, I'm going to have to give it a solid rating of a 6.5, man. Just based upon the matches that were on this card. It was absolutely awesome. Seeing Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, all on the same card. Absolutely awesome. So I'm going to have to give Starrcade 1995 a solid rating of a 6.5 at best. But this is my review of WCW Starrcade 1995. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.